Thank you, Jared. So, Debbie, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to you so we can get started and use every minute.
All right, I'm just going to give you a heads up. I've had some really bad internet connection, so I will be turning my video off. I'm first going to share a few PowerPoint slides with you. It kind of like introduce the system to you. So some of you have seen these before, but if you're new here, you probably have not seen them yet. So I'm going to go ahead and share those. So can you guys see that?
Yep.
Get my Zoom toolbar off of the screen. Okay. So we're going to talk about just the extension module today. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about the element side of the system. So I wanted to throw up first some helpful Go links for you. Some of them are Go links and some of them are just links to websites. So the first one is to, of course, our website. I do have a link, a Go link that takes you to the Vita section of the LOD website, which is this third one here, go.osu.edu/OSUE Vita help. That will take you to recordings of trainings, helpful documents. That's where we'll be posting our Vita guide that is under development. Hope to get it up there by tomorrow afternoon, if nothing else in draft form. I also have a Go link to writing goals, and if you joined us yesterday, we had Treva Williams and talking about goals, and we also had Melinda Hill, who was on talking about extension curriculum development. So I'm going to show you briefly those two sections in Vita as well. And then if you're looking for the individual participant form where a program participant can fill out their demographics, that's located at go.osu.edu/AAEEO. And that form now has a script with it as well. So you can read the script to your audience and let them know why we're collecting the data. We've found that reading that script tends to increase the participation rate of filling out those forms. So just a little bit about the system. We like to refer to it as an egg, not a bad egg, it's just an egg. So it has two different parts. So we have that element section, which I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, where you're going to have, be able to do searches of databases. This is where you're going to keep your funding, publications, your awards, and that's where you're going to also have a personal profile that you can edit. But in the Vita section, that's kind of the wrapper for the whole system. So this is where we're going to find our extension module. It's also where you're going to put supporting data for any of the publications that you add into the system. It's also where you're going to find any of your reports. If you're trying to generate a dossier document, you'll find that in the Vita wrapper section. Or if you're writing narratives. And the only people that really need to be worried about writing narratives for their document would be faculty members who are going up for promotion. Or if you're in a department, if you're in a department with an extension appointment, you might also, your department chair might ask you to write those narratives as well. But A&P, extension educators, you don't need to be worried about that narrative section. So the URL for the Vita website is vita.osu.edu. And if you're new here, the very first thing you're going to want to do is click on that sign in button up in the upper right hand corner. And then you're going to want to transfer your data. Not transfer your data, but kind of like get your account set up. So you're going to have to use a Kerberos username and password. It will ask you for a Buckeye Pass or Duo Mobile, whatever they're calling that. And then you'll see this screen. So the very first time you log in, if you need to click on this Curate Elements Data button, and that's going to set up your Elements account for you. If after you have logged in, you do not see this Elements Data link and you do not see this department link, make sure you click on this Curate Elements Data. If you see this after you click on that Elements button, then that just means it's going to take an overnight process for your account to be set up in Elements. If up here you do not see this department link in this gray navigation bar that goes across the top here, then you need to send an email to vita@osu.edu and ask them to add you to the Department of Extension. And just put this in the subject line, please add to extension in Vita, and then they will do that as well. This process is not an automated process, so it may take them a little bit of time to do it. If you have not heard from them within 24 hours or 1 business day, then go ahead and send them another email and ask them where they are in the process. Sometimes they can add you to the extension department and not email you back and let you know that they've added you. So make sure you log in again and double check. And if you still don't see this department link, then you haven't been added yet. You only need to click on that Curate Elements Data button 1 time, that very first time. So where does our extension stuff live? When you hover over that department tab, you'll see a drop-down menu come out. And you'll see extension and annual report. So this is where you're going to get to the extension module where we're going to input our data. And it's also where you're going to be able to create an extension annual report, which is what this second button does, where you're going to get your output of your data for that extension annual review every year. Now, T and Greg, we had a nice discussion on Tuesday about reporting and reporting habits. So this is one of the things, the more you use the system, the easier it will become to use. So even though we have a deadline of January 15th every year, please don't wait until January 14th to go in here and put your data in. Try to make it a regular habit. Go in the last Friday of the month, or try to do, 72 hours after giving a program or an event. Try to get in there and put your data in there. The more you use the system, the easier it will become for you to use. I just wanted to give you a quick screenshot of what is going to be included in the extension program section once we get into the module, because I will show it to you. I just wanted to give you a heads up of the fields that are in there so we can have this screenshot in our video. So remember that when we're talking about extension programs, we're talking about the overall, you'll hear people refer to it a lot as the large P program. So it's the curriculum that you're developing over the course of the year. It's where you're going to put a lot of the qualitative information about your program. So for example, the first fields you're going to see are drop downs and or fill in the blank with like limited text characters allowed. But then you're going to get down to things like the situation description. So why are you delivering this program in your county? What are the circumstances in your county that make this program necessary? So that's a little bit about the situation description. And then the target audience would be, who do you want to come to this program? So if you're delivering a program, for example, for car teams, that would be possibly juvenile traffic offenders would be your target audience. You're going to put in your program objectives, and just like our goals that Treva discussed yesterday, we want our program objectives to also be SMART. So make sure that they are measurable, they're realistic, they're time-bound. And the other thing we like to say about program objectives is make sure it is what you want to learn, what you want the learners or your program participants to get out of your program. Sorry? Activities products, this starts to look a little bit like a logic model if you're familiar with the logic model at all. So this is where we're talking about outputs. So activities products, what type of activities did you do? You held, 5 sessions during the year or 12 car teams meetings during the year, 1 a month. Did you produce any products from this? Were there any brochures developed, any marketing materials, things like that? This is where you're just narratively describing these types of things. Participation, we talked a little bit about the target audience, but then who actually participated? Like how many people came to these training sessions during the course of the year? Short-term outcomes, you're talking about, whenever we just refer to outcomes, remember we're talking about some type of change. So I like to talk about the ABCs of change when we're talking about outcomes. So that short term is some type of change in awareness. It might also be a CASA change, knowledge, attitude, skills, or aspirations. A medium-term behavior change is going to be some, medium-term change is going to be some type of change in behavior. So that's our B. And then those long-term changes, they typically take a longer time, but it's going to be some type of change in condition. It might be a change in policy. It might be a change in economics, like they're earning more money or they're saving more money. But it's those longer-term changes in some type of condition. The next section you're going to come to are checkboxes. So you're just going to say, this is the type of evaluation that I did. And this is to help us do searches on the back end. So right now, administration is pretty much the only one that can request searches. Or if you're like the leader of a statewide team, you might email and ask for a report on XYZ. So that's how we're having to do our searches right now. We're in the process of making it so that anyone who is a user of the system can search the database, which will in the long run help you to do some program planning and some work on the front end side of your programming. There's going to be a place where you can describe partnerships and collaborations. There will be a list if you have put into the element side of the system any of your funding. You're going to have a place where you can associate a grant with this program. And then the last option you'll have is to add team members. And when you're adding team members to a program, that program will appear in that other team member's profile. And I'll get into a little bit more description of the team member process when I get to the system. The next part I'm going to talk about today is extension events. So these extension events are kind of the little p. They're the events that you do all the time to support that large P program. So it's the 12 different sessions of CAR teams meetings that I held throughout the year. It might be something to do with the volunteer training. Like if I held a separate training for the kids that are delivering the CAR teams program, I would probably also put that under a CAR teams, my large P program, but call that a separate event. So in this, when you're talking about an extension event, it's much more quantitative. So there's a lot of information, there's a lot of numbers in this section and not a lot of like narrative words. So you'll see there's a few of the, some drop-down boxes. There's a few that of these fields are required fields. There will be a field on this screen where you can track personal notes, like you want to make a note to yourself of where you have delivered a program, for example. You don't want that necessarily to show up in your document, but it's a cue to help you figure out where you might look for those direct contact numbers, for example, if you're going back into the system and adding numbers at a later date. You're going to also talk about delivery method here, the scope of the audience. These are just checkboxes that you'll be completing. Back up here, I skipped over the did you teach. You'll be able to add two types of events into your system. If you are the organizer and you're not actually getting up in front of a group of people and teaching something, then you're going to say, no, I did not teach. And in this role down here, you'll just, you will put checkboxes like organizer or something where you didn't actually teach. If you did teach, if you got up in front of the group of people and you taught something, you taught a topic, make sure you click on yes for that event, because then that event will be put into your teaching table, into all of the documents that you generate out of the system. You'll be able to check whether or not there was a formal student evaluation, and this might be a EETs, but it also might be an end of program evaluation that you conducted. So it can be any type of evaluation that you did with this particular event. Contact hours, number of volunteers, volunteer hours, all of these things are like indirect contacts. the number of phone contacts, mail or email, media appearances, materials distributed. Those are what we consider indirect contacts. And then we get to our direct contacts. So these are the people that you interacted with. And it might even be over a webinar. So even though we've switched the last few months to a lot of our teaching has been virtual, I still don't like that term because that means it really doesn't exist, right? But we are teaching, right? Those are still considered direct contacts. It's just a different mode of contact. And again, this is where you can get that, that form where each individual person, once we do return to face-to-face, you can use this AEEO form to get, collect that reg data on your people. And then we come down to the last thing here is indicators. So back on the previous screen when I was showing you an extension program, one of the fields that you're going to select is called a plan of action. Depending on what that plan of action is that you select for your program is going to drive what indicators you see for that program or this event. So the educational video that you're going to create for social media, Rachel, I see you asking about, and did I miss another question? I see Lynn, I'll get back to you. So Rachel, your educational video, you're going to put into the system, but you're gonna, you will put the video itself into the element side. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow. That's going to be considered a creative work, the video itself, but you can put the event where if you were teaching, so for example, today's session, if I wanted to put this into my profile, I could add a teaching event to a program and say, this is where I, taught. And then if I want to put the video, I can put that YouTube video into the element side. So that wouldn't be in the teaching section. It would again be in creative works or publication section. So let me back up and look at Lynn's question. Yeah, so Lynn, there's a couple different documents that you can generate out of the system. And since you work in a department, if you want your department chair to see those extension programs and events, the only document that the programs are going to print out on is that extension annual report. So you can share that section of your extension annual report with your department chair along with, I'm assuming that they are requesting your dossier document. So you could just kind of provide a supplement that has that extension program section of an extension annual report as a supplement for your department chair. Does that make sense?
Well, it's been a while since I have dealt with this, but after I spend hours and hours putting in all the details for the programs or the programs and events, I can't actually, when I do the extension annual report, those things are not in that. And so
okay, so there's probably a field or two that you might be missing, and it might also be the parameters you're using to pull the report, and I'm going to talk about that at the end today. Okay. But I will show you a few fields in the extension program section. If you have not filled them out, they're not going to print on your report, okay? So for example, if you have an extension program in your profile and you have not associated at least one 2019, if we're talking about the 2019 reporting year, if you haven't associated at least one 2019 event with that program is not going to print on your document. You have to have at least one event associated with it within the calendar year of the report. And there's another field in there that if you have not filled the field out, then it's not going to print. I just wanted to talk a little bit about reach versus reality. So we're talking about parity and who we're actually reaching in our counties. That reg data that we collect or your actual reach, you can compare that to your community demographics. And that's where you're gonna like discuss your reach versus reality. So what do the demographics in your county look like, and how many of those people and what types of people are you reaching with that? If you want to watch a video, we did have a short little segment in one of our sessions. I can't remember when it was now, but I think it was during our evaluation week. But there is a short little video that shows you how to search the census data site to get county different demographics. So if you want to go to go.osu.edu/LOD data, that's a nice little video that Danae produced that explains how to search that database. So if someone asks you, what are the demographics of your county and who are you reaching, you can get that information easily. So Treva did a really good job yesterday, and I encourage you, if you weren't able to attend yesterday, to go ahead and review that video. But she talked a lot about goals, and the extension section of the Vita system is where you'll be putting in your goals. And I'm not going to go into that much farther, except to point out this link down here, the go.osu.edu/OSUE goals. If you go to that website, which is actually part of the extension operations website, you can see some good examples of goals. There's the first page you land on when you use this Go link takes you to a description of the difference between a performance goal and a professional development goal and expectations for how many you need of each. And then at the top of that page, like right above the first red line on that page, there's going to be a link to examples of those goals. And then what Melinda didn't get to really talk about yesterday, she talked about, the kind of the outline and everything for what you put into an extension curriculum development narrative, but she didn't really get to talk about where to put it. So this is the section that it will go into, the extension department section in Vita. So you're going to be able to associate a year, and then you're going to just have your narrative. It's an open text box that you can add to. I do want to highlight that you can only add one narrative per reporting year. All right, I'm going to go ahead and change my share and go into the Vita system. Okay, you guys should be seeing Vita now. T? Yes? Okay. I'm looking at T's face, but I'm, all right. Let me move my Zoom control so that it's not sitting in the middle of my screen. Okay. So you can see here that I have not logged in yet because I can't see my navigation bar is all gray, and I have the sign in link up here. Before you get logged in, you will see those buttons that I was talking about. Here's that Curate Elements Data button. And again, you only need to click that the very first time you go in, and then allow that process to happen overnight where they're setting up your Elements account. There's some nice links down here that give you some tips on suggested workflow in Vita. It also gives you a dossier outline if you're interested in going for promotion. As a faculty member, this is where you can view that this is what is in the dossier report, and this is where you put it into Vita. And then there's some Vita troubleshooting helps. And then there's this nice little introduction video. It's like a 6-minute video on what Vita is. I'm going to go ahead and get signed in. Yeah, I know. So you'll see my landing page has changed. So now I have all my links, elements data, supporting data, narratives. So this is the navigation bar for the system. As you hover over these, if you look at the item underneath the menu item, if you see a little box with an arrow pointing out of it, that means it's going to open up in a new window. Over here, if you see that there is a little page there, it's going to create a document for you. If you see a little envelope, that's going to open up an email for you. So if you clicked here for site support, that's going to take you to that vita@osu.edu email address. But what I'm really interested in here today is we're going to be talking about this department. So I've told you a little bit of background about all the different sections that are in the extension module, but now we're going to go look at them in a little more detail. So when you're viewing your profile, you will see a list of programs here. And we've built this so that you can expand or contract. In our previous reporting systems, pretty much everything was all in your face all the time. So here you can collapse your programs so that you get a much cleaner looking screen. Specializations is something that we didn't talk about in any of our trainings yet so far this week, but it's just a drop-down list or a checkbox where you can just select the specialization. And you can select up to 2. They're divided by our program areas, and you can pick 2 of them. And then you would click on Save. And Alan, if you don't have a department tab, send an email to vita@osu.edu and ask them to add you to the Department of Extension in Vita, and make that your subject line. You can also ask them in your email to let you know when they've added you to the Extension Department. And then you should see all this. So here's that goals section that we were talking about yesterday. And you can do the same thing, expand and contract things by clicking on these little links over here on the right-hand side. And here's extension curriculum narratives. So they're pretty simple. You just open up the narrative. Like I can edit this now that I have one created. And you will get, anytime you have a screen where you're adding a narrative, you'll see this WYSIWYG editor, and that just means what you see is what you get. So if I wanted to bold something, I can highlight it and bold it. I can add a bulleted list if I want to. I can add a numbered list. So we have a lot more formatting ability than we have in any of our past systems. And this really does help your supervisor when they're reading your report. It helps them to it makes it a lot easier to read, at least in my opinion. So they're not just looking at straight text with no changing in format. So instead of a save button, we have a submit button. So coming back up here to my programs and events, if I want to see what I had in 2019, I just come over here and I'll click on this expand button. There's a few different ways that I can add a new program to the system. If I want to add a 2019 program, I know I want to add a 2019 program, I just come over here to the plus symbol and it opens up on the right-hand side and it says plus program. That's going to open up a form for me that is already got 2019 selected for the year. If I want to edit one of my programs that I have listed here, which I only have 2 programs listed, I have my 4-H cartoons program listed and I have Vita training test. And I believe this is a program that someone else shared with me, the Vita training test. Anyway, if I want to edit this program, the 4-H cartoons program, I can just click on this little edit button. The other thing I can do with a program at this level is to copy it. So if I know I'm going to be doing this 4-H program, 4-H cartoons program in 2020, all I need to come over here and do is click on this copy button. It's going to open up a screen. It's going to tell me that I'm copying 4-H cartoons. Always when you're in one of these screens, working in one of the screens, look back up to the top and it will tell you whether you're copying something, whether you're editing it, or whether you're adding something new. It's very important when you're trying to copy an extension program from one year to the next that you're actually copying it. If you just click on the edit button and I change this reporting year from 2019 to 2020, you've just erased the program from 2019, okay? So make sure if you want to copy a program from one year to the next that you click on that little orange 2 pieces of paper copy button. All right, so it's telling me I'm copying. So I want to make this 4-H car teens program from a 2019 program to a 2020 program. So all I'm going to do here for right now is I'm going to change this year, reporting year, to 2020. My priority area has blanked out, so I'm going to go ahead and select that again. I'm going to say this is thriving across the lifespan. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to click on submit. And then it asks me if I want to save the new program. And then you'll see here, oh look, I have now a 2020 program. I'm going to come back down here and look at my 2019 program again because I want to show you a couple other things about how your items will display in your profile. If you come over here and click on this expand next to the title of your program, you'll see all of the events that are associated with this program, okay? You'll see that I have 2 different, go ahead.
Just a couple questions in chat, and I was waiting. I wasn't sure when a good place was to ask those, but Rachel had asked about specializations, and Liz had asked about days planned versus spent.
Yes, so Liz's question, I'm going to get to that question in just a minute because I am going to spend a little bit more time in that program window. I just wanted to show you how some things display on the screen. But for specializations, that's going to be a discussion between you and your supervisor. You have the opportunity to select up to 2. It might even be a discussion with the AD of the program area that you work in. Do you need a specialization? When you're first starting out, you may not know what your specialization is because you're brand new. So that may be something that changes over time. We have a few people on the call that have been around for a couple of years. So if one of them is willing to talk about specializations, I would be more than happy to turn the mic over. Or if you want to add to the chat window. Okay, so the events layout. Danielle, what's your question?
Okay, so I have my my main 4 program areas, which are like community leadership, engagement, non-traditional youth development, and volunteer development. So last year, I was under the impression that, say under community engagement, I have all of my events, so my Real Money, Real World, Cloverbed Day Camp, those kinds of things. I was told to put them in as each individual event. But then our area leader had us submit kind of quarterly this year, or like try to, so that we're not trying to do this the night before. Vitas do. And she was like, she suggested that I do like Real Money, Real World, and then copy each of those events underneath of that.
Yes, and I will talk about that when I get to talk about events. I'm going to talk about the difference here. So like if you look at my screen right now, you will see that I have, for 4-H car teens, it says I have 5 events listed here, right? So you'll see 2 different types of events I have. So these ones that are bolded, those are what I consider, I'm putting this in air quotes, my parent events. So if you, for example, look at this one down here that says January 7, 2019. You see the little calendar icon in front of that?
Yeah.
That means I did not teach at that event. That is something I organized, but I didn't actually teach at it. And then I also had a copy of that. So this is where I have copied this event, the responsible driving during prom season. I've copied that event and I delivered the same event on March 7th. Okay, and you can see that's a copy of that one. Up here, you can see this is a teaching event where I actually got up in front of a group of people and I taught something. That's the little apple book with an apple on top of it. That means I taught something. And what I taught was the dangers of distracted driving. I'm not just going to come in here and put 4-H cartoons. I'm going to put the actual topic of what I taught. And then you'll see I also have 2 copies of this. So here I just changed the title of the event because the only title that displays is the original instance of the event or that parent event that I was just referring to. So this topic here, Dangers of Distracted Driving, Adolescent Development, this is the only title that will appear on my document. But it's going to appear that this happened 3 times because I have the parent event and then I have 2 copies for 2 different dates. Okay, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but I do want to get into, and you can see that these are all events underneath this overarching 4-H cartoons program. Okay.
Okay.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like on the screen. So another question, Danielle?
Yeah, so like we were told to only have like 4 program areas and then put like cartoons under that. So like basically that's where I guess I'm getting kind of confused because I don't think that there's another way to add like another layer. Does that make sense? Because we have 4 main program areas and then like we put our events under that.
Yeah, so for example, when I was in the county as a 4-H agent back in the day, I had probably a list of 8 programs, I think. So if you're being guided nowadays a little bit differently, it sounds like they're advising you to have even less. So I used to come into the system and see some people that had like 30-some programs, like large P programs listed. So you knew that they were really reporting that at the event level. So when I did my programs, I had, for example, I did have a 4-H cartoons. I also had like a general youth development. I had a youth leadership development because I was responsible for the youth leadership, youth government day that we had in Lorraine County.
Okay.
I also had a Cloverbud one. And for example, underneath my Cloverbud program, I would list my Cloverbud day camp. I would list my Cloverbud volunteer training because we know that's a little bit different than the older youth volunteer training. And then any training that I did, for example, with my Cloverbud day camp counselors, I would put all of those events, I would put underneath Cloverbud. So it sounds like you're just kind of arranging your large P programs a little bit differently. So you still can get at the information. It's just how you title these events that support what you're doing is going to become pretty important. That's why you wouldn't, like, one of your programs, I think you said, was community engagement?
Yeah, it was community engagement and outreach.
Okay.
So like that's a lot of our school visits and that kind of stuff.
That's gonna cover a lot of stuff. So it's gonna be very important that as you're copying your events, that, for example, if you're putting in something that's a cartoons event, that when you do a copy of it, you're doing a copy of that cartoons event. When you're doing Real Money, Real World, if you don't have that separated out as a separate program, and since that's one of our signature programs, usually that's a good idea to separate it out. But make sure that the event that you're copying is the same type of event.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want to come and copy this Dangers of Distracted Driving. I wouldn't want to make a copy of this, even though, especially if it was like I'm doing the responsible driving during prom season event where I didn't actually teach. So make sure you're copying, when you're using the copy feature for events, that you're copying the same type of event or the same subject that you taught.
Okay.
The other thing you want to keep in mind about copying events, you cannot copy an event from one calendar year to the next calendar year. So if I wanted to copy this dangers of distracted driving into the 2020 programming year, that is going to throw a big wrench into the computer software, and it's just going to have a fit on you. So make sure that you are only copying your events within the same year, okay? Copy programs from one year to the next, but copy your events only within that programming year. Okay, so Kathy, I'm looking at your question. It took me a while to realize.
I didn't really have a question, Debbie. I've been here forever, and it took me a while to figure out that, like, where you have Berkshire High School and Forest Hill High School, the one above that where it's just the 1/11/2019, that's another school you did it at, but it goes in here looking different.
Correct.
Correct,
and because this is the title that will display on my document.
Right. I always had trouble, and once I figured it out, then it made more sense. So I thought maybe that would help some newer people.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back to looking at this 4-H cartoons program. I'm just going to click on the edit button. There's a couple different ways. I already told you the different ways you can add a program. So I'm just going to click on the edit button here. So you'll see these drop downs. The title of the program is up here at the top. The reporting year, the plan of action is a drop down. And if you look at this list, this is basically divided into our program areas, and we have some signature programs listed here at the top. Something that is coming that is not here yet, but we've been given permission to add another plan of action for COVID-19. So if you created a brand new program because of the COVID-19 pandemic, then you would be able to select that as a plan of action. We're also going to be adding COVID-19 as a keyword. So if you have, you're still delivering the same programs that you were delivering, but maybe you pivoted and had to deliver them in a different way, or maybe you added a few things, we're also going to add COVID-19 as a keyword. So you can just select that as an additional keyword. But in general, the plan of action, again, this is what drives what you're going to see in an extension event. It drives that indicator list. So once you have selected this plan of action and you've added one event to it, you can't come back here and change this plan of action. So our signature programs are listed first. Our 100 level programs, those are generally our A&R, or Ag and Natural Resources. The 200 level are our Family and Consumer Sciences. The 300 level are 4-H. The 400 are Community Development. And then down at the bottom of the list, you'll see also some new and emerging issues that maybe are related to A&R, Community Development, Family Consumer Sciences, 4-H. And then you'll also have the opportunity to, if none of these apply to what your program is, then you can add a local priority program 1 or 2. These are used much less frequently than everything else. You should be able to find something in this list to cover your plan of action. So I'm going to leave this one as youth development. The other thing is, I think we're trying to, like our assistant directors for our program areas are trying to develop some like best practices or selections for some of the programs that are out there. So you might see a signature program team leader that is saying, make sure you select this for your plan of action, or this for your program area, this for your priority area. So look out for those. If you're doing that type of program, just look out for those types of guidance that are being shared from our assistant directors. The next is another drop-down. You're going to select your program area, your priority area. This used to be called impact areas. We have all 6 of them in there. Statewide team. This list probably could use some updating, but when you select a statewide team here, this helps to, it puts a tag on this particular program that will help that program leader that statewide program leader to, if they want to pull a report, for example, and figure out what's going on across the state with that particular statewide team. It does not add everybody on that statewide team to that program, okay? It's just a filter mechanism for us to use the system. The next thing you'll see is the days planned and days spent, and we had a question about that earlier. So when we talk about days planned and days spent, remember I told you as a 4-H educator, I had about 8 or 9 programs. When I talked about my days planned and days spent, the programs that I spent a lot more time that were my major programs, I would typically have about 22 to 25 days for those programs. My programs that didn't take as much time, they were maybe established programs or just not as large as some of my bigger programs. I usually had about maybe anywhere from 9 to 12 days. So we have a specific formula for days planned and days spent though. So let me talk a little bit about our calendar year first. We have 365 days in a year, we know, but supposedly we're not working every one of those days, right? So once we take out our weekends and our holidays, and yes, I do realize that a lot of us do work on weekends and holidays, but technically we have 251 available days during the year. And then when you think about probably 60% of our time is supposed to be spent delivering, developing, planning, executing these programs, okay? So that leaves us a typical person anywhere from 100 to like 140 days. And those days should be spread across all of your programs. And that's the large P programs. So don't go into one of your programs and say, oh, I did 365 days here. It should be 8-hour work days. And we realize too that you don't ever get to spend 8 straight hours working on one program. There are interruptions, there are, you're juggling tons of balls in the air all at the same time. We realize that. So using your professional judgment, how many days did you spend? Days spent would be how many days you spent in this programming year. So this is a 2019 program you see up here. So how many days in 2019 did I spend on this program? Okay. And Lynn, if you did not fill out this days spent in this program, this program will not print on your document, even if you do have events associated with it. If the computer thinks you spent 0 days on this program in the programming year, it's not going to print on your document. Okay, everybody hear that? Days planned will be how many days will I plan to spend on this in the upcoming year? So how many days do I plan to spend on it in 2020? T, you had a question?
Yeah, Debbie. So of the days available to plan, are you supposed to plan 100% of those, or is it 80% or 90%? Is there a notion from the assistant directors that there's some flexibility left there for, let's say, emerging issues?
Yeah, so that can happen. That's part of the reason why we say 60% of those 251 days available are spent on these programs.
Okay, so I missed that. So 60% of the days available.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's really what I wanted to get to was, you know, make sure that you don't have, like, when you look at all of your programs, you should not have more than, say, like 150 days between all of your programs for a given year. I have looked at plenty of profiles where if I added up all the days spent, they would have like 600 days in a year. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Now, if you don't have the days plans filled out, and again, this is how many days you plan to spend on this program in the upcoming year. If you don't have this number filled out, then it will not print. At the bottom of your document, there is a section called program planning, and it just lists the title of the program and how many days you plan to spend on it. We are running out of time quickly. So I'm going to kind of breeze through some of these things because we have talked about them, but we haven't really, I want to like give you some information about an event. So a county highlight item, it's just, do you want to highlight this for your supervisor? We used to have something called county highlight reports, and those kind of went away. They might come back, but it's a program that you want to draw attention to your supervisor and make sure they realize the type of work. Maybe it's something where your enrollment was down the year before and you found out, you found a new way to market the program and the enrollment increased by a lot and you want your supervisor to know about that. So you could click on county highlight item. Please do not click county highlight item for every single one of your programs. That removes the specialness of that county highlight item. Keywords, if you want to search for keywords, we have this little filter thing here. So if I know I want to have clover buds for one of my items, which would not be appropriate for 4-H cartoons, I can start typing in the word and it will reduce my list. This keyword list is also filtered or driven by the program area you have selected. So we have a total of like 400 and some keywords. But as soon as you select this program area, that list is going to be greatly reduced. But you can use that little filter feature and you can select up to 5 keywords. We already talked about what all of these other fields were. Remember, I told you whenever you see a narrative field, you're going to have that WYSIWYG editor. So please go in and describe what the situation was, your target audience, program objectives. So these are all open-ended. I did say I wanted to get to the bottom here and talk about team members. So just really quickly here, team members, you can add people to this program by typing in their name.number. Let me see if I can spell Amy's last name. Oh, look at that, I did. Awesome. So I just looked up Amy Comacher and added her to this program. So anyway, once I click on save for this program, it will add this program into Amy's profile. Now, make sure before you share with a team member that you have filled out as much of this information as you can. So fill out as many of these narrative fields as you can before you share with your team member. What this is going to do, the action of sharing this program with my team member, it's going to create a this program in her profile. Then she will be able to go in, it sends a snapshot to her profile. So she can go in and edit and make any changes that she wants to in that program after she accepts it, and it will not make any changes on my program. Then Amy will be responsible for not only accepting the program in her profile, she will want to edit the program window to reflect how many days she planned and spent on this particular program. And then she might want to add, maybe she has an additional objective for her county. Her impact statements might look slightly different. So you might have a template of what everybody on your team could be using as impact statements, and then they can go in and plug in their county numbers. So this team member feature is really nice because it cuts down on work. So make sure you're, one, communicating with your team and you know who is going to be adding the program for the rest of the team members, and then who will be adding those team members. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on submit. Real quick, private program. We work for a public university. Just say no. This is a public program. That gets at those search features. We want your stuff to be searchable. Now, I'm just going to go in and if I want to make a copy of this January 11, 2019, let's say I also did this program in April, I want to make a copy of this original instance. I want to make a copy of that parent because if I make a copy of a copy of a copy, it's going to degrade, right? Generally. So I'm going to go ahead and click on copy next to this event. I've switched to events. And it's going to open up copying, dangers of distracted driving, adolescent development. Now, I know that this title is not going to appear on my document because I'm making a copy of the program. So I'm going to say that I performed this, I did this at another school. I don't know. I can't think. Because I know this is not going to appear. This next section is also not going to appear. So if you want to keep any personal notes, maybe your contact at that school, this is not going to appear on any of your documents. It's more for so you can open this up in the future and know what you did with it. Is this a related copy or not? I'm going to say yes, this is a related copy because I want it to appear in the same line as on my document as the original instance. So this is going to show up as one line on my table that says dangers of distracted driving, and this will be a copy of it. I'm going to change the date here to April 2019. You'll see, again, these are drop downs. What county was it in, et cetera? Was there a student evaluation? If there was, you can describe what that evaluation was. Here, if you have selected that you were the teacher, make sure you have selected one of these things on here that describes teaching. For example, you were the presenter, you were the lecturer, you were the co-presenter. So if you said you taught, make sure you have a description in there. Here's those indirect contacts we were talking about earlier. And yes, I'm flying through this now. And here's that reg data table. Okay, so we're breaking down by adult and youth, males and females, and then the categories for race and ethnicity built in there. And then because I selected whatever plan of action I selected, I think it was youth development. Here's my list of indicators for a youth development type of plan of action. I'm going to go ahead and click on submit so you can see that this has added to my profile. And then I'm going to just do quick and dirty here. I'm going to come over here to department, and click on annual report. I'm going to click on show advanced filter because I want to make sure that I'm getting a 2019 report because that's what I just added to. And then I'm going to click on request annual report after I've selected the year. It'll generate, and I'm going to just show you real quick that teaching table that we have. So we have that dangers of distracted driving, and what the system has done, it has counted how many copies and the parent, so it says 4 times offered, and then it has summed all of my, my direct contacts under the enrollment. Okay, and then under section 2B, this is what we were discussing today. So my goals would be up here if I had any for 2019, which apparently I didn't have any listed. And then down here is my list of programs. And at the bottom, it will give me a summary of any of the direct contacts who I didn't teach. So this is a summary of non-teaching event information for this program. So this was really, really quick. And I realize that, but it is 2 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and, are there any other questions in the chat box? I'm not seeing any. Something I may try to do with this recording is to come back in and try to kind of separate it out so that we can give you some bookmarks in the video. I'm clicking on all the wrong buttons. I just want to do a stop share. Oh, there it is. Okay. It disappeared on me. All right.
Okay. Any final questions for Debbie? We covered a lot. That was a lot, Debbie. Good job.
Yeah. Sorry.
No.
Tomorrow we're going to spend our time in the elements side where we'll be talking about publications, creative works, funding, service, awards, other professional activities. I'm going to stop the recording if nobody else
Yeah.